Most Americans believe that childhood is merely one phase of life, and that once you move past it, you leave it behind. Success, independence, and emotional toughness are seen as the marks of civilization. Once someone finishes childhood, they're expected to leave it completely behind. But Carl Gustav Jung revealed a reality that directly contradicts this cultural bias. Inside every adult lives a child. This isn't a symbolic memory of the past or an emotional remnant. It's a real psychic entity that continues to operate silently in the adult mind, sabotaging decisions, destroying relationships, and shaping all our identities. This archetypal figure that Jung called the inner child is not passive. Quite the contrary. It acts as a deep, mostly unconscious energetic force that carries both the purest qualities of existence, like creativity, sensitivity, and the capacity for wonder, and the oldest and deepest wounds, like abandonment, rejection, and humiliation. In America's harsh individualistic culture, this archetypal child is especially repressed. The messages a young child hears, especially a boy, are direct blows to the inner child's existence. Don't cry, be a man, there's nothing to worry about. Girls face similar pressures but in more subtle ways. They're taught that, to succeed, you need to manage other people's emotions. Their emotional well-being is sacrificed for the family's welfare. Jung observed in his clinical practice that much of the suffering in adults comes from the repression of this inner child. Instead of looking at it, taking care of it, and integrating it, we learn to hide it. We keep it hidden behind masks of strength and independence, corporate roles and system logic, and we pay a heavy price for it. Neurosis, chronic anxiety, emotional dependency, a sense of emptiness, and endless repetition of destructive patterns. Americans especially live in this contradiction. They can succeed on the outside, but inside they struggle with a deep sense of deprivation. The problem is that this child doesn't disappear when ignored. Quite the opposite. The more it's denied, the more it manifests in hidden and scattered ways in the shadows. An adult who reacts with rage to small criticisms, feels invisible in relationships, or can't set clear boundaries isn't, in the superficial sense of the term, immature. They're simply being controlled by a wounded child who was never seen and never understood. This is where the most sensitive and powerful point of Jung's thinking lies. This child doesn't need to be fixed as if it were a flaw. It needs to be recognized. The adult spirit needs to give it a legitimate place. According to Jung, real psychological development doesn't happen by denying the child within us, but by developing what he called the inner father ego. It's the ability to look at yourself from within yourself, to create an internal dialogue between this wounded side and the protective side. This is where real emotional maturity begins, not suppressing pain but listening to it, not trying to look strong but building genuine strength. American work culture especially damages this. The message, "Put your feelings aside and get the job done," has pushed millions into workaholism, relationship avoidance, and lives filled with psychosomatic illnesses. An invitation to your soul's forgotten part. This is an invitation to revisit this forgotten part of your soul. A deep dive into the idea that your inner child isn't an obstacle in your adult life, but the key to unlocking your authenticity, creativity, and emotional freedom. Understanding this dynamic isn't just therapeutic work. It's a spiritual act of survival in a modern American society that demands we become increasingly disconnected from ourselves. Maybe if we could look into the eyes of the child we once were and still are, we could understand why we're so tired, why we feel so lost, and why we feel so needy. The answer was never outside, in success, in making money, in being attractive, or in winning on social media. It was always inside. Archetypes are living psychic structures for Carl Jung. Archetypes aren't abstract ideas or poetic metaphors. They're living psychic structures that exist in the collective unconscious. The child within us is an active psychological entity that exists regardless of a person's chronological age, the center of emotional energy. A person might be a 45-year-old CEO, but there could still be a 6-year-old inside controlling their decisions. The child within us isn't stuck in the past. It shows up in your reactions right now, in your desires, and in your most irrational fears. Much of what we attribute to historical trauma actually comes from what the child within you is afraid of right now. Fear of failure, rejection, inadequacy, these often emerge, not from past events, but from the child currently living in your psyche. The child represents both the beginning of the individuation journey and the transformation potential that hasn't yet arrived. It's a symbol of the self in formation. Within it lies the essence of spontaneity, sensitivity, and curiosity. But at the same time, it also contains unprocessed trauma, shame, and feelings of abandonment. This inner entity affects adults' behavior secretly but destructively. When the child within us is ignored, it shows up as disproportionate reactions, emotional outbursts, irrational insecurities, constant need for approval, like on social media, and more. This dynamic isn't a sign of weakness. It's the direct manifestation of a powerful archetype operating unconsciously. Jung saw this figure as one of the most important elements of the unconscious. Ignoring the child within us is like cutting off a part of the soul. And Jung said that every attempt at personal or spiritual development that doesn't include this reconnection is doomed to fail. Millions of Americans go to therapy, read books, meditate, but nothing fundamentally changes because they never create a real dialogue with this child. 3 basic manifestations. Let's examine the 3 basic manifestations of the inner child that Jung identified and how they silently shape your deepest patterns. First, the wounded child. This child carries stories of explicit and implicit trauma, abandonment, and emotional neglect. It's the child who learned very early that expressing its needs was dangerous, that trusting leads to pain. In American families, this often looks like this: divorced parents or emotionally absent mothers or fathers. Getting the message early on: you're big now, you can take care of yourself. Or the opposite: a parent's failures being placed entirely on the child's shoulders. When not integrated, it shows up in the adult as fear of intimacy, chronic anxiety, dependent relationship patterns, and a persistent sense of emptiness. It's this child that makes us react to criticism as if it's an existential attack, that makes us repeat cycles of self-abandonment. When you get a comment on social media, it feels like the end of the world. Being rejected at a job interview doesn't feel like just a missed job. It feels like, I'm not good enough. Second, the eternal child. While the wounded child lives in the past, the eternal child lives in escape. It's the part of us that refuses to grow up, to take responsibility, and to bear disappointment. American culture especially feeds this child. The elevation of youth, the mythology of forever young, consumer culture. It constantly seeks the thrill of novelty and fears limits. In adulthood, this shows up as chronic procrastination, unstable relationships, avoidance of routine, or the feeling that being an adult is a prison. You're 50, but you still haven't found yourself, still waiting for that real job you deserve, still dreaming of being that model or actor. Responsibilities suffocate me. Marriage, kids? No, that would trap me. Third, the divine child. This represents the deepest creative, spiritual, and intuitive potential of a human being. It's the part of us that still believes in the mystery of existence, that feels life as a sacred phenomenon full of possibilities. It's the source of our insight, our genuine compassion, and our capacity for wonder, inspiration, creativity, deep meaning. These come from this child. But ironically, this child is often suffocated by the pain of the other 2. Jung believed that most people live primarily under the rule of the wounded child and respond to the world with emotional deprivation and survival mode. In America especially, this is true. Survival mode, stress, fear, worry about failure. The divine child can't come alive in this mode. The key to wisdom: recognizing. All 3, recognizing these 3 isn't an intellectual exercise. It's the key to achieving deep self-knowledge. When we can identify which of these children has control at any given moment, we've taken the first step toward reclaiming control of our own spiritual life. You go out into the world and someone cuts you off. Immediately the sensitive child reacts. You either explode with anger or you shrink and feel invisible. In a relationship, your partner criticizes you. The wounded child takes control. Do you immediately want to leave, or do you suddenly believe all the flaws are yours? You start a project. Which child? Are you working with the excitement of potential possibilities, or are you looking for an escape? Masks, hidden vulnerability. Behind strength from very early ages, we learn that certain feelings aren't welcome, that being too sensitive is a flaw. The American child learns this from messages like, be tough if you're a boy, or stay controlled and innocent if you're a girl. Over the years, this emotional conditioning teaches us to wear masks. Masks of strength, control, independence, maturity. We create a self that's socially acceptable, pleasing, and protected from rejection. But this self is an empty shell built on systematic denial of the child that still lives within us. Carl Jung observed that beneath the guise of maturity, the repression of the child within us is one of the root causes of modern psychological suffering. This is especially evident in the American workplace. Emotional suppression is seen as the key to success. Repression doesn't eliminate pain. It displaces it. Repressed anger turns into anxiety. Ignored vulnerability emerges as addiction, self-sabotage, or psychosomatic illness. Instead of healing our wounds, we become experts at masking them. These masks are unconscious attempts to provide emotional safety in a world that punishes vulnerability. But the problem is that these strategies distance us from who we really are. They create a chasm between our authentic self and the self we show the world, and the greater that distance, the more emptiness we feel. The child within us doesn't fade over time. It waits to be recognized, heard, and accepted. When this doesn't happen, it doesn't sabotage out of malice. It sabotages because that's the only language it knows to get our attention. Many adults spend decades in this cycle. In the name of maturity, they ignore the child within them and as a result, live a depleted emotional life. The inner father ego, the beginning of healing, they believe they need to be stronger, more rational. But actually what's missing is the opposite. Sensitivity, listening, presence. There's a lack of someone who can look at the child that was never looked at. The figure Jung called the inner father ego is exactly that. It's the psychic state that allows the adult to become the mother or father they never had for themselves. This is where true healing really begins. If the child within us is a living and active force in our psyche, how can we coexist with it without being consumed by its wounds? Jung's answer is this. What matters isn't suppressing the child, but developing an adult within yourself who knows how to take care of it. Jung called this the inner father ego. It's a psychic prototype that functions like an inner parent, embracing, protecting, and offering what the wounded child could never get from the outside world. Emotional maturity isn't abandoning the child within us. It's establishing a relationship with it. This requires conscious self-acceptance. The inner father ego is the ability to recognize when the wounded child has taken control, and instead of reacting impulsively, saying to yourself internally, I see your pain. I'm here. I won't abandon you. This simple psychic stance has a revolutionary effect. You shift from reactive mode to active self-care. This process has nothing to do with the coldness, distance, or emotional indifference confused with adulthood. Quite the opposite. It's about developing a kind of inner presence that knows how to manage this pain without becoming identified with it. You become simultaneously both the feeling child and the caring adult. This integration is what transforms a fragmented soul into a functional one. Reparenting. The radical inner dialogue. Jung proposed a radical and deeply transformative path. Reparenting. Reparenting yourself means consciously becoming the adult you needed as a child. This isn't going back to relive trauma over and over again forever. It's about establishing a real relationship right now with the most tender and wounded part of your spirit and doing for it what your original caregivers couldn't do because of their own limitations, ignorance, or trauma. This includes offering emotional validation, inner security, clear boundaries, and most importantly, permission to exist as you are. This process begins with listening, deep listening, not intellectual listening that tries to understand pain with logic, but emotional listening that embraces what arises without trying to fix it. The child within you doesn't want to be fixed. It wants to be recognized. It wants to know that its pain has meaning, that its fear isn't insanity, that its need for love isn't excessive. The reparented adult is someone who knows how to cope with their own vulnerability without betraying themselves. Reparenting also involves establishing inner boundaries. The child within you seeks from others what the conscious adult hasn't yet learned to provide. It seeks protection in dysfunctional relationships, validation on social media, refuge in substances and consumer culture. Learning to say no to these impulses isn't rejection, it's protection. It's like saying, you don't need to beg for love anymore. I'm here. I'll take care of you. Emotional self-regulation, simple but powerful actions. Another core aspect of healing is the practice of emotional self-regulation. This means developing the ability to calm yourself, to show up during moments of crisis, and to soothe yourself without resorting to force or escape. These are simple but powerful actions. When anxiety arises, choosing to breathe, choosing to leave toxic environments even if it hurts, choosing to stay when you want to run. Yes, you want to stay in that job. Yes, you want to stay in that relationship. But the adult inside you is protecting the child. We're leaving, it says. I won't expose you to this. Each of these actions sends a quiet but definitive message to the unconscious. I won't abandon you anymore. Over time, this process begins to change something very deep. The wounded child stops screaming because its voice is finally being heard. Impulsive reactions decrease because there's now an adult in charge. Relationships change because the emptiness no longer demands to be filled at any cost. Energy locked in defenses and repetitions begins to circulate freely, and with it comes creativity, sensitivity, and a genuine desire to live. This is the essence of true healing, not erasing the past, but transforming the present. It's not about erasing the past. It's about creating a present where old pain is acknowledged. Reparenting yourself, saying that the story didn't end where it got stuck. It's not rewriting what happened, but radically changing how it lives within you today. There's a new possibility to completely transform the way those experiences shape your present. Something much more powerful happens and transforms when the child within stops being carried as a burden and starts being recognized as a guide. The pain that once showed up as chronic anxiety and emotional dependency slowly begins to dissolve, and what emerges from this process isn't just relief, it's strength. Not aggressive or performative strength, a quiet strength born from reconnecting with the parts of yourself that were exiled. When this child is no longer seen as a problem and is accepted as a fundamental element of your being, it stops dwelling in the shadows. It no longer needs to sabotage your life to get your attention. It no longer needs to scream when someone rejects, criticizes, or overlooks you, because now it knows it's not alone. There's an adult there, ready, protective, and having learned to love. Alchemy. Pain transforms into creativity, and at this exact moment, something almost magical happens. Pain becomes creativity. Scarcity makes room for genuine connection. Anxiety transforms into presence. When the child within you feels truly safe, really safe, not just in words, the divine child emerges with its highest face. The part of you that isn't afraid to feel, create, and explore. The part that carries the deepest meaning of life. This is where art gets made, music gets composed, and lives change. Because now being a child isn't a sorrow, it's a strength. Jung said the child is a symbol of wholeness, and that when integrated, a person stops living in fragmentation. Real freedom begins when you no longer have to fight yourself. When you no longer need to wear a mask to deserve love or shrink to be accepted. When you've become the home you always sought in others. This is a turning point, and it doesn't come from outside. The radical act. I looked inside and I saw you. This new life begins from the radical act of looking inward courageously and saying, I see you. I'm here for you. I won't abandon you anymore. This is the beginning of a new life, a more whole, more authentic, brighter life. A life where you no longer have to merely survive. Now you can actually live. Carl Jung's discovery. about the inner child and the inner father ego shows us that emotional maturity isn't about wearing a mask, it's about compassionately owning your most vulnerable side. True healing doesn't lie in erasing the past. It lies in today's adult saying to yesterday's wounded child, I see you. Millions of people in America still don't see this child. They're lost chasing likes on social media, chasing success, chasing other people's approval. But the answer has always been inside. It always will be. Your sacred commitment. If this message has touched that quiet voice inside you, and if you feel the determination to begin the reparenting journey, share this commitment somewhere. To affirm the sacred promise you're making to the child within you, write this sentence. I won't abandon you anymore. By writing this, you've taken the most important step of your transformation. Even if no one else sees it, the moment you say it and write it, your spirit's child has heard it, and it answers back, okay, I'm here too. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next videos we've prepared on philosophy and psychological integration that will support you on this deepest journey of your soul. Final words. The greatest love. Remember, the greatest love isn't approval from others. It's the unconditional acceptance you show to your most vulnerable part. Even if the world doesn't validate you, even if your job doesn't appreciate you, even if the person you love doesn't understand you, the adult within you knows. It's there, ready, watching. In America's culture of toughness, this is a revolutionary idea. Take care of yourself, they say. But it's not just about that. Take care of yourself means look into your own eyes. It means actually care for yourself. Maybe today you're going out and nothing has gone right. Maybe you feel like a failure. Maybe you feel completely alone. But the adult within you knows you're still here. You're still alive. And that's enough. That's real maturity. That's real strength. Because once the child within you starts to feel truly safe, really safe, not just in words, everything changes. You notice you laugh more often. You notice you forgive more quickly. You notice you dream more, want more, and live more. Because that child has finally become your friend. Not your enemy, not a problem. A part of you, your most pure, most real, most authentic part. And that part that was once suppressed with, be tough, don't cry, don't show, be strong, now gives you the greatest gifts, creativity, courage, compassion, inspiration, and a life worth living. This is it. The path Carl Jung showed us. To become truly adult while turning inward to meet ourselves. To learn the difference between staying vulnerable and staying strong. And finally, to make a choice. To betray ourselves or to embrace ourselves. Most people choose the first, but you, if you've stayed with this message this long, maybe you have the courage to choose the second. I wish all of you well. May you be reunited with this forgotten part of your soul. I won't abandon you anymore.